Hi, everyone. Get ready to hear how I exposed my wife and best friend's shocking betrayal. I, 34 male, met my wife, 33 female, 10 years ago at a small art gallery in the city. My best friend, let's call him Oliver, was an artist, and he was showing a piece there. My wife was there with one of her friends, and I approached her as soon as I saw her. I thought she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, and I had to be with her. My wife's friend, let's call her Mia, actually ended up going home with Oliver that night. Somehow Oliver and I ended up marrying best friends. We thought it was funny, but it was really perfect for all four of us. We went on double dates together all the time. We took trips together, and we even planned vacations together. The four of us were practically inseparable. My wife was a librarian, so she didn't have much opportunity to travel for work. However, I worked in advertising and I traveled often to film commercials. We were used to my schedule for the most part. Oliver and Mia both worked from home on a business that I ran together online. So when I was gone, I knew that my wife spent a lot of time with Oliver and Mia. I didn't mind it at all. I was glad that she had somebody there to keep her company. During one of the work trips that I had planned, my computer had an issue with the screen, so I sent it to Geek Squad to have it repaired. While I was gone, I took my wife's computer since she rarely used it at home anyway. I got to my hotel room when my plane landed and went to use the computer to check some emails and get some work done. You can always tell when somebody clears a history on something. My wife didn't use the computer a lot, but I knew that she used it. There should have been histories of Christmas gifts she was planning on buying, bookstores, and her personal email accounts. However, the history was completely blank. I was a little curious about why she cleared the history before giving me the computer. Granted, it was her personal computer and she probably looked things up that she didn't want me to know about. If the shoe were on the other foot, I would have cleared my history before giving my computer to my wife. I didn't give it too much thought after that because I didn't think that my wife would do anything sketchy. However, moments later, I accidentally logged into her email using the saved information that she had instead of using my own. It sounds convenient, but it genuinely was an accident. I was so used to using my credentials that way that I just pressed OK without giving it a second thought. I went to log out of it right away when I realized, but then I saw an email exchange between my wife and Oliver. The message in the inbox was the most recent one out of a 280 email chain. I knew that they were friends. All four of us were. I had no idea that they were having private conversations with each other. It struck me as very odd. I clicked on it to see what it was, and I was completely broken by what I found. They were having an affair with each other. They were sending each other explicit videos and images through email and planning the times when they would be able to get together. I didn't read through all the messages, but I did look at some of the first ones that they sent to try and figure out when it started. The affair had been going on for 2 years. Anytime I was away from home, Oliver and my wife took that opportunity to be together. They slept together even when I wasn't on a working trip. There were times when my wife would sneak Oliver into the library after it was closed and have sex with him when nobody else was in the building. Early on, there were some emails about possibly bringing me and Mia in on the situation and swinging. It was Oliver who suggested it, but my wife immediately told him that I wouldn't be okay with it. She was right to think that. Oliver thought that Mia might have been convincible, stating that he thought she would be gullible enough to just do what he wanted. I thought that was a horrible thing to say. I ended up converting all of those emails into a PDF and keeping that for myself. I marked the most recent message as unread and logged out to make it seem like I had no idea what was happening. I was going to be away for 3 days working, and I had to focus on what I was doing, or I could risk losing my job. It was absolute torture trying to pretend like nothing was happening when it felt like my entire world was shattering. I had the PDF and I needed to figure out the best way to utilize it. My wife and best friend had both betrayed me, and I wanted to get back at them and make them regret ever crossing me. I mulled over what I could do when I returned, and it finally hit me. It was the middle of summer, and it wasn't anything out of the ordinary to invite Oliver and Mia over for a barbecue and some drinks. I suggested it for the weekend when I got back, and my wife was all for it. They showed up on that Saturday, and everything was normal. While we were eating, I brought up to everyone the possibility that we trade partners for the night. It was a joke. I had no intention of doing that, but I just wanted to see their reactions. Mia was appalled by what I suggested, but noticeably my wife and Oliver weren't that shocked. Oliver's lack of reaction actually upset Mia quite a bit. My wife pulled me aside and asked me about why I suggested that, but I just went back to the table and I told Oliver that it was his idea after all. I quoted what he said in the email and mentioned that he thought that Mia would be gullible and would go for it. She was very confused, so I handed her a couple of pages of the email highlights that I printed out. She read over them, and from the context, she figured out what was happening very quickly. She immediately started screaming at my wife and Oliver about what they did. She was hysterical and upset about everything, and I didn't blame her. I felt the same way when I first found out. Oliver tried to punch me in the face. He accused me of ruining his life. I didn't fight him as much as I wanted to take my anger out on him. I knew that it would only lead to more drama. My wife tried to explain what was happening to me, but nothing she said helped her. Basically, she said that she and Oliver had always been attracted to each other, and after a while they couldn't take it anymore. They ended up sleeping together. She told me that she didn't think monogamy was for her either, which would have been nice to know before I was married to her for 6 years. Mia and I both ended up divorcing them and pretty much taking everything from them in the divorce. They said that they were attracted to each other, but after everything happened, they didn't even try to be together. Oliver desperately tried to get back with Mia because he said that it was a mistake and she almost gave in to be with him. I was able to talk her out of it. I sent the information about my wife sleeping with Oliver in the library to her boss, and she was fired. Now she lives in a studio apartment in the city. She's reached out to me several times apologizing and suggesting that we give it another try. I think she's realized just how good she had it with me and regrets her choices now. I'm in a good place now after all of this, and I don't want to look back at any of it. I'm finally ready to put myself back out there and move on from it completely. I can't even imagine finding out that the two people you should have trusted most in the world have betrayed you while you're away from them and have to pretend like nothing happened. It must have been unbearable for you to go through that. It definitely sounds like Oliver wasn't a good guy by any means. Saying that he could manipulate his wife into doing something even if she didn't want to do it is very creepy. It's a really good thing that you convinced her not to get back together with him when he tried. She likely would have been very unhappy with him after everything anyway. I always think using the excuse of not wanting to be in a monogamous relationship after cheating is ridiculous. If you feel that you might be polyamorous, then you need to discuss that with your partner before you cheat on them. If it comes down to it, you might not be compatible, and that's okay. Cheating is never an option. It sounds like she was just using that as an excuse to make it seem like she was more sympathetic. Anyways, let's now get into our second story for my 28 male, fiancé 26 female, and I met at a bookstore about 3 years ago. She was working there at the time, and I was going to pick up some new books. She was stocking the shelves, and I saw her and thought she was cute. I asked her for some help looking for a particular book, and we walked off together. We started talking, and I asked her for her number, and things took off from there. I proposed to her about 2 years into the relationship. I knew from the moment that we met that she was something special. I knew I wanted to be with her, and I saw a future with her. Our relationship was great from the start, except for a few issues that we had to work through based on her past relationship. Her ex-boyfriend, who we'll call Ben, was her first serious relationship. They were together for 7 years, and throughout the entirety of it, he was cheating on her and treating her like garbage. She was single for about a year before we met. During that time, she said she did a lot of self-discovery and healed from the relationship, though it didn't always seem like that to me. I never gave her any reason to suspect that I was cheating on her, and I treated her like a queen. The only issue that ever came up was when she started to feel insecure about herself. The relationship she had with Ben put a toll on her, and there were times when she thought that she wasn't good enough to be with someone like me. Ben was a sleaze. He couldn't hold down a job. He was sleeping with anybody that would pay him any attention, and he berated her for the smallest things. I didn't do any of that. I had a great job. She was the only woman for me, and I made sure she knew how wonderful I thought she was. I would treat her with respect, and she wasn't used to it. I knew she had a lot of trauma from that relationship, and I did everything in my power to help her get through it, but I could only do so much. It was on her to take care of her trauma and recover from it. As much as I loved her, it didn't seem like she was willing to take those steps. I hate even saying it because it sounds so insensitive, but it's the truth. I suggested that she go to therapy or see a counselor, but she would tell me that she couldn't afford it. I even offered to pay for it, and she didn't want to do that. All I could do was hope the situation would get better over time. I worked a regular 9 to 5 job in the office, and she was working at the bookstore. Her hours were less regular than mine. Some days she would go in around 10 a.m., and some days she would go in around 2 p.m. I was always at work when she was leaving, regardless of the time, but I always picked her up afterward because she didn't have a car. Because she took public transportation, we shared our locations on our iPhones, so I could always make sure she was safe. It's not something I normally would have done in a relationship, but she had several run-ins with creepy passengers on buses, and it made her nervous. I also like having that peace of mind. Around the holidays with Black Friday coming up, she was picking up a lot of extra hours preparing for Black Friday sales. Part of that included optional late night hours that allowed her to prepare new displays and unpack the large quantities of inventory the store received before the sales. When she did that, I didn't see her for dinner or anything like that. I offered to pick her up when she was off her shifts, but she told me that she didn't want to disturb me, so she just planned on taking Uber. I didn't want her to get into some strange man's car in the middle of the night and have something happen, so I stayed up for her regardless. I told her that was the plan, but she insisted on me not picking her up because she didn't want to bother me. The first night that she was gone, I checked her location around 11 o'clock when she was supposed to be clocking out, and I saw that she was at the bookstore. I could see the location updating every few minutes when I checked it to show was in a car on her way home. Everything looked good, so I was less worried. One week, she told me that she was only scheduled to work late 3 days, but on Thursday, she told me that she would be working late again. I wasn't immediately suspicious about that because it seemed like a normal enough thing. I figured maybe another coworker called out or decided they didn't want the extra hours after all. That night, I did what I always did when she worked late. I was up and around the time she was supposed to be coming home. I looked at her location. Only that time, she wasn't at work. She was at Ben's house. Right away, I was wondering what she was doing there. Surely, if she had to go over to his house for anything, she would have told me about it. It feels silly to admit it, but I didn't even think that an affair was possible. It never would have crossed my mind that she would be cheating on me with him. I waited for the location to change for about half an hour and it didn't. It wasn't moving at all. I felt weird looking at her location without her knowing, so I waited about 10 more minutes until she would normally be home and I called her. She didn't answer. After that, I started to worry. She never ignored my calls or messages. I knew that Ben didn't have her best interests in mind whatsoever. From what she described, he was never violent with her, but he didn't want her to leave him. I ran through countless different scenarios in my head about what could have been happening. None of them involved her cheating on me. After the location had it moved and she didn't answer my calls, I decided I was going to go see for myself what was happening. I drove over to the house and saw a car in the driveway, so I assumed that Ben was still there. When I checked my fiancé's location, she was still inside the house. I approached the front door, but before I could get there, I heard music coming from the other side. It was the type of music you would have on a sex playlist. It was then that I realized nothing nefarious was happening and she could have willingly gone there to have an affair. I was frozen for a moment. I didn't know exactly what to do. I had a pretty good idea about what was happening in the house, but I figured if I knocked they could play it off as something that it wasn't. I ended up going back to my house and waiting there. My fiancé didn't come home for about another 45 minutes after I got back. I just rolled over and pretended to sleep while she got ready for bed. I asked her about work the following morning, and she told me that it was fine. She even made up a story about some drama that happened. She was lying to my face. She also told me that the late night hours were going to be extended for a couple more weeks. I figured that she was lying about that too. She was preemptively covering for the time she was going to be spending with her ex. That same night, she ended up going back over to her ex's house again. I knew it was happening and I was already preparing to break off the engagement. However, I didn't want to just calmly break it off. I wanted to get some kind of revenge against her. I thought about it for about a week when she was visiting him instead of working, and I came up with something. We were going to be hosting a Friendsgiving dinner at our house, and I figured there was no better time to tell everybody about her affair than then. I almost considered not doing it then because I didn't want to ruin the mood, but toward the end of the meal, I stood up to make a toast. Everybody thought I was going to toast to friendship and my loving fiancé, but I ended the engagement right there. My fiancé was shocked when I made the announcement. I think she thought it was a joke at first, but it definitely wasn't. I elaborated by explaining that I knew she was going over to her ex-boyfriend's house. My fiancé tried to defend it, but she couldn't come up with a good excuse. I just told her that the engagement was off and that she could go stay with Ben if she wanted to be with him so badly. After that, she ran off to the bedroom to go and hide away from everybody because she was humiliated. Everybody else packed their things and left shortly after. When they were all gone, she came back out and yelled at me for humiliating her in front of all of our friends. She told me that she was sleeping with him again, and that was all that it was. She tried to make it seem like because there was nothing emotional involved and wasn't an affair. I didn't believe that there weren't emotions involved. They were together for a long time, and she stayed with him through a lot of stuff. She had to have had serious feelings for him to put up with as much as she did. I told her that I wanted her to get out of my house, and I gave her a week to gather all of her things and leave. She did end up going back to Ben. I think they're still together, but he definitely hasn't changed his ways, so she must be miserable with him. All of the friends that were with us were definitely on my side. Some of them have tried to make excuses for her behavior by telling me that she might have been manipulated into getting back with him, but I still don't care what the reasoning behind it was. She cheated on me with a man who treated her like garbage, and I just couldn't be with a cheater. Opie, it sounds like you were a caring partner who was there for your fiancé. It sounds like she had a lot of trauma from the past relationship with Ben, and it is a shame that she couldn't find a way to move on from that, so he wouldn't have any hold over her. I don't know if you had a chance to look through any messages or anything like that, but I would guess that he was probably in her ear and manipulating her. However, that doesn't excuse the fact that she lied and cheated on you. It's sad that she would leave somebody who cared about her so much and treated her so well to be with somebody who would take advantage of her the way that Ben was. I think she must have had a very low view of herself, which is not good for anyone. When you suggested that she should go to therapy or counseling, you were completely correct in that. It sounds like she should consider going. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation or someone else's, then please do not hesitate to contact. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Mark. I hope you all are having a fantastic day or evening. In today's story, Opie found out his spouse cheated on him with his own son after they met at a bar, then got drunk and slept together. There's no absolute worst betrayal than your own spouse and son doing something like this. The Opie then rightfully kicked them out immediately and went no contact. Now they're both homeless. Let's get into today's story to find out what happened. I was a young dad, my now late wife, and I had my son before we were even 17. She sadly died suddenly at 22 not long after we got married, and I've been a single dad since. It's been tough, but I think up until this I did my best. I hadn't had time to have any relationships really up until I met her. I threw myself into being a dad and concentrating on my business. I'm not saying I've been a monk, I just have not had anything serious. Never anyone serious enough to introduce my son to. But just under 3 years ago, I met AJ. I wasn't expecting it, but before long I was head over heels. The first 6 months or so were more casual, but when we realized we loved each other, we made it official. I was even planning to ask her to marry me next month on her 26th birthday. I was even going to ask my son to be my best man. I didn't introduce them at first due to not being sure how he'd take it, so we waited a while. But after they met last year, we've since all hung out, and everything has all been good. Granted, this year they haven't seen each other much due to lockdown and him being at uni, but I didn't think anything of that. I couldn't see her much this last month due to the lockdown again. However, I've noticed as the past couple of weeks have gone on that she had been a bit quiet and moody. I had asked her about it, and she put it down to being overwhelmed. Likewise, I have noticed it in my son being a bit withdrawn, but I assumed he's been busy with uni. When I finally saw her again this weekend, I really noticed, so I called her out on it. She broke down and admitted she cheated on me. Just like that. I was shocked. So I was trying to get it out of her, and she admitted it was with my son. Just before lockdown started in November, she was out with her mates, and she bumped into my son in the pub. They got pissed, shared a taxi, and ended up drunkenly having sex. I basically threw her out there, and then saying I never wanted to see her again. She was begging me, pleading and making a scene and everything. I then asked my son to come over and I confronted him. He admitted it was true. He said it was a huge mistake and begged me to forgive him. I told him he needed to stay at someone's house and that I didn't want to look at him anymore. He's at my mom's. I haven't told her what he did, but she knows it's serious seeing as how close we have always been. She's been ringing me, sending me emails, texting me begging for another chance, and so has my son. I've packed up the stuff that she left here and left it in her front garden in a bin bag. I've even shucked her Christmas presents I've got her too. Let her enjoy them early. I'm absolutely distraught. They're the two people I loved most in the world. I wanted to marry her, maybe have kids and spend my life with her. Likewise, he was more than my son. He was my best friend. I sacrificed so much to give him an amazing life, and they've both stabbed me in the back in the worst way. I don't think I'll ever forgive them ever again. They're welcome to each other as far as I'm concerned. I feel so update. I wasn't planning to originally do an update because of so many abusive comments/texts received last time, but on the other hand, I had so much support I thought I'd update those who have been supportive. So I basically met up with AJ, my ex. I asked her the truth, what went on, and whether there was anything else going on previously. She was really passionately saying no. It literally was a case of her having a drink with her mates, and my son was in the pub, and they got drunk together. When they were sharing a taxi, he admitted he liked her, made a pass, and that was it. She was saying things like she'd never ever do it normally, but because she hadn't seen me for a little while and he reminded her of me so much that night, it just happened. I told her to stop blaming the booze or anyone else and that she needed to own it, no one else. I also was honest with her that she was the first person I've let in and loved since my ex-wife died, and I've been happier with her in the past 3 years than I was for years before that. I told her I was even going to propose to her. She broke down, telling me again how sorry she was and asking me for another chance and saying that she would never forgive herself. I told her she needed to one day so she could learn from this, but that it was over for us. I would be blocking her number and email and I didn't want any contact again. Then I left. I feel much better after meeting her. As devastated as I am, I do feel like that's a bit of closure. Simply to see that I don't really hate her but actually pity her. Through not being able to control her alcohol or keep it in her pants, it's cost her a relationship with someone she cares about and likely will affect her relationships for years to come. Not that I don't think she's any less responsible or deserves the outcome. It also helped me to truly see how immature she is. Before this, I was blissfully ignorant because I was happy. Now it's made me really conscious of it. Never again. Now my son. I realized the other day when I made my post I was very angry and the way I was typing it seemed like it was going to flat out disown him. But let me stress he's my son, my flesh and blood, and I love him dearly. He's also my wife's son, and I could never just get rid of him for her, but he has let me down and really hurt me massively, and I have lost not just all respect but trust in him. So I met him also and heard his side of the story. It was largely the same as hers, but the difference was he said she was being really flirty with him, and she said he really reminded her of me, and that's when he told her he had a crush and made his move. I told him what I wrote out above, that I love him but have no respect for him or can trust him anymore. I told him also about my plans, that I was going to propose to her and even have him as my best man. He was gutted, just really silent, and started crying. I told him we needed to have no contact for a while, that he needed to get a job and not work with me on weekends as he does at the moment, and we needed to talk to my folks to see if he could stay with them for a bit. But in order to do so, I wanted him to be a grown-up and tell them why to their face and deal with it as a grown-up. So I drove him there and made him tell them. They were devastated, not just upset, but the look in my mom's eye. I'll never get over that. She told him how disappointed she was in him and that she never thought he'd do something like this. I asked her if he could stay there for the foreseeable future, but not for free. He had to pay his own way, proper board, contribute towards the bills, buy his own food. She agreed out of respect for me. I also sat him down and showed him that I transferred over a large amount of money and explained that was the money I was saving for AJ's engagement ring, but seeing as what had happened, I wanted him to have that as a reminder and to use it to pay his grandparents' rent, if nothing else. He was absolutely stunned at that, trying to give it back to me. I told him if he did that we definitely were done. We've agreed on no contact at least until Christmas, and then we all, me, him, my folks, could spend Christmas together. I've been largely reflecting for the past few days mainly on me and why I went for AJ in the first place. I was extremely flattered when she asked me out even though I'd never normally consider anyone that young. But in hindsight, she was the same age as my wife when she died, had the same ethnicity, mixed race, and also even did the same sort of job. So I guess I went for it because she was like my late wife, which honestly makes me really sad. I know I can't blame anyone else for that, but it made me realize also that she, AJ, was only my second ever serious relationship in my life. Like, imagine that, a 37-year-old guy having that few relationships, that a girl 5 years older than my son is a huge chunk of my relationship experience. It also makes me miss my wife massively. I've been just having a bit of me time the past few days, having Alan Partridge marathon that was mine and my wife's favorite thing to watch together. It helps me feel close to her when I'm down. I'm seeing if I can get in touch with the old therapist I was seeing after my wife died and make an appointment with him. I might see if he can take my son on too. Edit. A few people have pointed out we might not be able to see the same therapist due to a conflict of interest. I didn't think of that, so maybe I'll get a recommendation from him for someone else suitable. Thank you. I definitely need to work on myself before I ever date again. I think I have too many issues to be a good partner at the moment, and when I do, I'm not dating anyone her age again. I think I'll do a strictly 80s policy of only going for people born in the 80s and definitely no one born after 1989. Wow, OP, you handled an incredibly difficult situation very well. You should be extremely proud of that. Many people in your position would have lost their minds with rage and grief. When I read your bit about how much AJ reminded you of your wife, I can't help but think that perhaps this was something of a rebound for you. Loss, being as profound as it is incredibly complicated. My thought is that you found aspects of your wife and AJ, maybe even recognized them subconsciously, and despite the time that had passed, decided to pursue the closest person to your wife you had met since she died. It could explain what attracted you to AJ in the first place. What kept you with her, and what allowed you to ignore the immaturity you recognized in your reflections. It may also explain why you were so keenly feeling the pain of losing your wife again. You just lost the two people who reminded you of her the most. Your son will come back, but AJ never will, and in that way you have lost your wife again. Loss is such an event, especially sudden loss, and the damage it causes does not heal quickly. In fact, some of it never heals at all, but there is no timeline for recovery. It is not linear. I hope you do not take this event and use it as a reason to never try again. You will recover and you will likely love again, but it may be time for you to begin to accept that you will never love another woman the way you loved your wife. That's okay, because that's life. Now, let's get into today's second story. I recently found out that my wife of 19 years was having an EA that turned a bit physical. D-Day was back in mid-June. She had a friendship with our middle son's best friend's dad. We'll call him D, that I became worried about. When she wanted to go out to get drinks with him one night instead of coming home, I saw the writing on the wall. The next day, I checked her phone for the first time, really just to check on the timeline of her asking me if she could go out versus contacting him, and found that she had deleted all of her previous messages. I confronted her, and after denying it for a while, she admitted to having an inappropriate relationship with this guy. It was only after she read up on emotional affairs online that she admitted to having one the next day. She also learned that to get through it, she had to come clean, so she opened up about past affairs/inappropriate relationships she had sought. I asked her to put together a disclosure letter in which she detailed this. 1 year into the marriage. Held hands with T when alone during a ski trip. Dirty danced with him in front of his girlfriend when I was out of town. Went to see him at his hotel room when I was not around. She said nothing happened. For years into the marriage. Invited her boss M and friend P, who she saw with a prostitute the night before, up to her room during a conference trip to Asia. Had drinks, traded massages with P, laid on the bed while they poured beer into her mouth. M said it was the sexiest thing he ever saw and allowed M to play with her underwear while they laid on the bed together watching TV. 5 years into the marriage. During an alumni weekend that I did not attend, she played footsie and snuggled with my best friend before sleeping in the same bed with him. Nothing else happened. I don't think my friend would have done anything more. He was a known drunk snuggler. 5 years into the marriage. During another work trip, she planned to get a large hotel room to entertain and invited over some friends she had met during some work training, including a woman that she was attracted to. She said that she was worried she might be bi and had a lot to drink. Someone suggested a strip drinking game and it turned into an orgy, where she did oral on the girl she found attractive and made out with multiple girls the whole night and also kissed the only guy there. She says she did not have sex other than giving oral since she was on her period. Since D-Day, she is trying to do her part. We are both doing therapy. I'm very codependent, turns out, and I'm starting to see how messed up she is mentally. She seems like she has some narcissistic tendencies, like needing constant affection from other people and seeking those relationships that even she admits are with unscrupulous guys, as she is interested to see where it goes. She has told me that for a while she had 1 foot in and 1 foot out in our relationship, even though we have 3 awesome sons. She had trouble bonding with them when they were born and just recently dropped the bomb that all along she thought that she stayed in the relationship for me and that these things that she did were her way of making it so that she could stay with me. This, of course, is no longer what she thinks as we attempt our. Now she sees all the errors of her way and wants to learn how to feel empathy again and love me as I should. I wanted to do our for the sake of our boys, but after you tell someone that you were only in a marriage of almost 20 years just to keep me happy and had to cheat to do it, I just don't see how I can be with this person. I mean, I love my kids, but I feel like she wasted 20 years of my life and I have no idea how I will ever trust her again. If I didn't out her, she would have gone to her grave with this stuff. I know I'm not perfect. I've got anger issues sometimes and contributed to the circumstances that caused her to feel like maybe she couldn't be all in, but when I asked why, she didn't tell me about the first instance or the orgy. She admitted that it was because I would have broken up with her. So which is it? Did you want to be with me back then or not? Oppe. I'm having trouble with the fact that you actually believe that she never, in almost 20 years of cheating, never slept with any of these men. She is definitely gaslighting and downplaying the living daylights out of you. What surprises me is that you actually believe her. This is the same woman that has disrespected and made a mockery out of your marriage and vows, and you just believe that nothing happened with any of these men. Why? She's a proven liar and serial cheater, so again, why? Because she said so. I think you need a bit of a reality check here, brother. Maybe threaten her with a polygraph test. You don't have to follow through to see if she's telling you the whole truth. I think you will probably be surprised by her reaction. Good luck, brother. I think you are in for one hell of a ride with this deceitful woman. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed the stories, please don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If there is a story you would like to share with me about your own situation, please do not hesitate to contact me. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Mark. I hope you all are having a wonderful day or evening. In today's story, Opie found out his wife cheated on him with a guy she met at a bar and now claims that she wants to have kids with him. Now, let's get into today's story to find out what happened. I, 37 male, have been in a relationship with my wife, 35, for 15 years and married for 5. We have 2 children, ages 3 and 1. On December 13th of last year, she met the AP at a bar about 2 blocks from our apartment. She had been in a state of depression for a while preceding this and was self-medicating with heavy alcohol abuse. She had gone to the bar for a drink and met the AP. They struck up a conversation. He listened to her troubles, and they exchanged phone numbers. He gave her some weed. She was too drunk and slash or high to drive the 2 blocks back to our apartment, so she called me. I had been calling her fairly frantically all evening as she had failed to pick up the kids from daycare and had effectively vanished. She was so far gone on the phone that she had to ask the AP standing next to her, as she called me, where she was so I could come and pick her up. When she finally sobered up, she simply said that the AP had been a friendly person who had been concerned when she had drunk too much. The day she received some texts from him, including a couple telling her that she should come to his apartment and that he was waiting for her. He also began making calls to her phone. After a few ring-throughs with her agreements, I answered the phone myself and told him that she was married and that he should F off. He said that he was just calling to make sure she was okay, since she had been in a bad way the day before. I gave my wife the phone and she told him that she was okay and to stop calling. For the next week, I thought that was the end of things with him. On December 20th, we went with the kids to visit my in-laws for Christmas. On the 23rd, D-Day 2, my wife's parents went out to finish Christmas shopping. While they were out, I heard my wife talking to someone on the phone. My 3-year-old son, our 3-year-old, was in the room with her and she was having my son say hi to whoever she was speaking to. I asked her who it was, and she said she was talking to one of her friends from grad school. Something about the situation did not sit quite right with me. So when she went to put our son to bed, I found her phone and sure enough, the call had been to the AP. And there was a history of texts from the 13th to that evening, with some obvious gaps where messages had been deleted. The most recent conversation was about our kids, including some photos of our children, and ended with the AP stating how much he would like my wife to have his babies. I confronted her immediately, and she burst into tears and asked me to please not leave her. What has followed has been 2 months of lies and false promises to end things. She has told me that she wants to be reconciled and then gone right back to the affair. She pays verbal homage to go marital counseling, but only as a tactic to delay and to continue with. She has shocked me with the casualness with which she can lie to my face. She has continued her behavior up until this very evening as I write this. She is with him at his house right now. This week, I'm going to be talking to a lawyer and initiating a divorce. It's astounding how quickly and how thoughtlessly she has discarded our lives together. I'm ashamed to have spent so much of my life with her. If it weren't for our kids, who I love with all my heart, I would count all 15 years with her as an utter waste. OP, I'm so sorry. You're in the middle of all this right now. Please keep in mind one thing. You can be a super dad with or without your wife. You continue to be there for your kids and your connection will grow stronger. As for the AP and your wife, let them live their fake fantasy. You are better than them both combined. The insincerity of their relationship will come to haunt them. She will come back, but you will be gone, living and being a great dad. Good luck. Now, let's get into today's second story. I've been married to my wife for a little over a year now. We've been together for almost 13 years. We have 2 children, ages 2 and 6, and we have a problem. My wife always seemed to be a happy woman, the life of the party, and a social beast. But she changed in the past few years. Her first pregnancy was really tough on her, and while giving birth to her oldest daughter, she developed a trauma. She got into therapy again and slowly rebuilt her positive flow, or so I thought. During these times, I noticed that she stopped talking to me about her negative thoughts if I admitted how much she hurt me with them. We had a second girl, and this time she did feel it, for about 3 or 4 months. Then the shame hit her that she hadn't felt this with our oldest girl. And in secret, she started having dark thoughts again. It turned out that her thoughts of suicide went from unwanted to welcome. We got married at the end of 2016, and it turns out that her feelings during that period were darker than ever. Before our marriage, she had met a man, a tattoo artist who was 15 years older and was working on her tattoo. Something to remember her dark period and her strength, and was married himself. They started an affair 2 weeks after our marriage and met in secret until I caught her this January. While digging through her lies as she didn't want to tell me the whole truth, I found out that she had been in contact with 3 other men. She had sexed with two, but only had deep and meaningful conversations with the last one. The weeks after that, she confessed to me that she had been very suicidal and that her meetings with that man felt like she could escape her reality and live in a bubble for a few hours. Nobody but me knew of her dark thoughts, and she had hidden her darkest drives even from me. We had a ton of arguments, but she told me she didn't want to lose me and that she loved me, that she made a mistake, and that she was afraid that she was broken beyond repair. She had been seeing a therapist because she was suffering from burnout, but she had only told her 10% of the truth. When I demanded she tell the therapist everything, they told her that the case was too hard for her kind of therapy. At the time, the verdict was still a postnatal depression that devolved into PTSD. A few weeks ago, she started with another clinic, and they quickly stated that the verdict was wrong. PTSD didn't fit because she didn't have trauma and because her thoughts were welcome and not intrusive. She felt at peace when browsing online for ways to kill herself or deciding what music should be played at her funeral. Currently, the verdict is dysthymic depression, and she'll be starting treatment soon. But now for the hard part. We spent 1.5 months trying to get past the fact that she had an affair, and I was slowly giving it a place that didn't cause pain all the time. The betrayal was painful, especially because she was always the one who crucified people who did this, and who started accusing me of having an affair the past year. I slowly got into a spot where I could manage, but 2 weeks ago, I confronted her with the fact that she had only shown remorse 2 times. That I felt as if I was fighting harder for this than her. That I felt as if I was the only one who had cheated and who was suffering, while she was being angry and defensive 24/7. She told me she felt it and that she would try. But 30 minutes later, she called me upstairs and told me it was over. That she loved me and the kids, but that her feelings were dead. Her trust was gone. I know the stress of being caught, and having to hear that she has dysthymic depression is causing her to block her emotions, to go on the offense instead of admitting to what she did. But it feels as if she's making a decision while being in her darkest place, as remote from her true feelings as possible. She has agreed to go to couples counseling. We have our first session tomorrow, but I'm really looking for advice on how to handle her depression. And she has already stated that she wants it to work out with all her heart, but currently has no faith that it will help. She's dead inside. When talking to other people, she wants to let the whole world know what she did to crucify herself. She keeps stating that there are two sides to the story. And it's no excuse, but I felt so alone, thereby forgetting that I was just as alone as her in the relationship. And when I talk to other people about what happened, I'm mostly focusing on my mistakes, not hers. It feels as if she blames me for what she did, for what she became. I'm not the kind of person who likes to be on the wrong end of the stick, but I've quickly found out these past weeks that if I confront her or show too much anger, she withdraws and pushes me away or gets angry. I know she's not without feelings. During the time we spent apart would be crying, taking long walks, and mentally unstable. She presents herself for what she did to me, and her children for the pain she caused us, and hates what she's become. So how on earth do I handle her depression and adultery? Show her that I love her and that I care, without being a burden or giving her the feeling that I'm pushing her. We've been living apart these past 2 weeks, and she keeps telling me that she does love me, but that the spark is gone. But she wants it to return. But in the meantime, she can't be around me. How do I cope with her aggression and defensiveness without losing myself? How do I show her that I'm not the man that I became? How do I make her understand that the burden of not being good enough, or my wife wouldn't have preferred death, was slowly eroding me? Update. So we had our first couples therapy a few hours ago, and it was an eye-opener. Yes, she is depressed and has severe issues. And no, that does not excuse her behavior. She told the two therapists and me bluntly that she lied to me when she had sex with me the past few weeks. She told me repeatedly that she would never be intimate against her will. But during that session, she told us that she felt obliged to do it because of her mistake. Hearing that she lied about something as primal as this, even though I asked her and never forced her, angered me tremendously. Yes, she feels shame, but not guilt. It's all focused on her own pain and sorrow. And the fact that everyone who knows about this judges her, the other parents at school, her parents, mine, and our friends. The shame triggers her depression, and in turn, that triggers her anger. She's just spouting her own rationale for having an affair, a story that she's practiced for over a year in her own mind, and usually in an angry state of mind. And that's something that should and will stop. During the session, she was confronted several times by the therapists on why she was so angry, on why her pain and regret focused on the literally small things that were wrong in our marriage, instead of the things she did wrong in the same marriage. I'll wait until the next session before confronting her with anger at her total lack of respect for me and our kids, because I reckon that things like that can be best discussed with a therapist in the room and not one-on-one. If I confront her myself, I'll only cause her to dig herself in and lock the doors. If there's a neutral party present, she won't have that chance. Yes, I still think there's a chance that we can save this. And that's still what I want. But there has to be respect from both sides. I'm not someone to pick a fight with the mother of my children, the woman I still love, but she has to understand that if she walks, it's the end. She does not get to decide if we remain friends. She does not get to decide if and how I heal myself. If she walks out of this, she loses me. I'll remain civil for the kids, take care of the finances, and scrub her out of my life. There will be no bond between us, and I'll use every part of my energy to rebuild my life and be there for the kids. She doesn't get to decide if she'll be a factor in it. Ida. Opie, I'm really sorry about what you're going through. For the past 6 years, you've exhausted yourself trying to fix someone who doesn't want to be fixed and isn't responding to your efforts at all. You are bearing all the emotional weight of your relationship. I know that she has depression and clearly has some deep mental health issues. But depression doesn't cause someone to treat their partner badly or cheat on them. Every single act of disrespect and unkindness is a choice that she makes. If staying is what you want, at least take care and look after yourself more. Get in tune with how much this whole thing is affecting you and be a better version of yourself. So, if she finally decided to move on regardless, you would know you've tried your very best. I wish you all the best with your situation, Opie. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on today's stories. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My wife was recovering from having our first baby. Per the doctor's orders, we were waiting 8 weeks before having sex. She was 24 and I was 26. I felt like we were too young to be parents, but at least we were married for 4 years before conceiving. This was the life I hoped for. I did everything right, according to my family, and it made me feel great. One person I met in my past told me that life isn't as simple and easy as I expected it to be, but I was goal-oriented and willing to follow any successful influencer's advice. I believed fate was on my side. Even with what I'm about to tell you, I still believe fate is on my side, because otherwise I may never have discovered the truth. On one of the last days of waiting, I got a notification at work that there was motion detected outside our house, and a box was delivered. I only worked 10 minutes away, and it was lunchtime, so I decided to pop by unexpectedly. Besides opening my package, I thought I might be able to seduce my wife for the first time in forever. I stopped for flowers. When I got to the house, there was a really nice car parked outside. I didn't recognize it. My original plan was to knock on the door and have her open it, but I decided to use my key. As soon as I walked in, I heard our bed squeaking upstairs. I barged into our bedroom door, without realizing I broke it. I could not believe what met my eyes. My wife was sprawled out on our bed with our baby's pediatrician. She immediately sat up and grabbed her face, repeatedly saying no in disbelief. The doctor panicked and ran. I didn't care. I'd have him on camera fleeing our house with his loose pants, which meant I'd probably be able to prove he was sleeping with my wife, which would certainly get his license revoked. I noticed the baby sleeping in the bassinet, 6 feet away from his mother, as she cheated on his father. My wife immediately began saying how sorry she was. She said he seduced her because he knew she waited long enough to heal. I wanted to throw up, but I was too angry and didn't want to appear vulnerable. I told her she was the sleazy, pathetic mother. I asked her why she couldn't have just said no, why she couldn't have just waited for me to get home. I felt myself starting to break down because I was realizing my marriage was over. I didn't want to forgive her. I didn't want to have sex with her. I told her these things, and she wailed so loud, she woke up the baby. My mind started working at a mile a second as I held and bounced our son. I told her that since she was breastfeeding, she could take him with her to her mom's house. Her mother was a strict Catholic, and I wasn't even sure she would let her daughter and grandson move in. She was going to be furious at her daughter's behavior, and I'd make sure she knew the truth at some point. My wife was freaking out, telling me what I already knew, that she would have nowhere to go if we told people the truth. I forced her to move back in with her mother by telling her our house was being fumigated. My Emile wasn't too fond of me, so she wouldn't even wonder where I was. After they moved out, a major twist happened. I got an anonymous typed note in the mailbox that said, "Leave me out of it or you won't be around long enough for a second marriage." I was shocked, but immediately knew it was from the doctor. What a piece of crap. I was very amused when I checked our doorbell camera and found him escaping with his pants down. I went to the police and filed restraining orders on him and my wife. Then, I made some phone calls. I had a big family, including one lawyer. He agreed to represent me. Before the court hearing, my Emile was basically forcing my ex and son out of her house, so I had to tell her what my wife did and how I got a restraining order because my life was threatened. She was beside herself. She told me I needed to come get my son at least, so I did. My wife absolutely hated this, and I think that's why her mom did it. She was so upset with her, but couldn't kick her out. She had trouble looking at her the same way. As terrible as my MIL was, she knew how necessary and important loyalty to a spouse was. Then you add the fact that my wife was a new mother, cheating with her son's doctor. Before I left with our son, I heard them screaming at each other, and when my MIL told her she wasn't mature enough to be a mother or wife. It was intense, but I'm sure my wife deserved this hellish new reality, stuck in her strict mother's house without me or her son. After the divorce, I was awarded primary custody of our son, and I was able to prove the doctor's unprofessional home-wrecking actions. He was no longer allowed to practice, so he'll have to find something new to do with his life. I am so happy with the outcome from all this. I hate that it all happened, but this wasn't my fault, so I can only adjust and accept the change. She still calls me often, asking for help or complaining about things. She used to say sorry every time, but I told her to stop. I don't always answer her calls, but she does get visitation with our son. This event made me question a lot about life and relationships. I've realized how important it is to love and trust yourself. I knew I could get through this from the moment I was presented with the issue. I knew I had no choice but to go through it, and all I had was my own strength and willingness to go on. I enjoy my life because it's all I have in my son, and I have a whole new routine. My sister watches him while I'm at work, and she loves it. I enjoy my own company and my son's, and when it comes to dating, I just take it slow and make sure everything feels right about it. That's all anyone can do. I hope anyone reading this realizes how great it is to experience life at all. I won't let this painful end to my marriage make me question how wonderful life is. Opie, I am so sorry your wife took advantage of your trust by sleeping with your son's doctor. She was not thinking of you or the consequences you would all have to face for her actions. She was selfish, immature, and impatient. I can't imagine why, as a wife with a newborn son, she couldn't have said no to this stranger and waited for her husband to get home. She gave in to the temptation, despite being a married woman with a growing family. I don't think she expected to be caught, which is why this opportunity seemed acceptable. Never cheat on your spouse expecting to get away with it. The truth always comes out, either immediately or unexpectedly. No matter when the truth comes out, there will be consequences, starting with the shame and guilt they feel when they look at their spouse. A beautiful lifelong commitment is full of honesty, loyalty, and constant communication. There's nothing a spouse should know about their partner. Knowing this, imagine how hard it would be to pretend everything is fine when you know you've betrayed them. You handled this very well. I wish you the best going forward. Now, let's get into our second story for today. When our marriage came to an end, my wife was 37, working as a physical therapist for 5 years. I was 35. We were married for 11 years. We were both content without bringing children into the world. We just started going through the process of becoming adoptive parents, but that would never happen for us. I was proud of her for how hard she worked. She loved her job, and I never expected her to do anything she'd be ashamed of. One day, she came home early. I was off work that day for some reason, and she looked devastated. I asked her what was wrong, but she didn't want to talk about it right away. When she did talk to me, it was like she rehearsed what to tell me. She said her boss noticed she had accumulated a large amount of vacation time. She pretty much ordered her to take a paid vacation. I didn't understand what was so sad about that, but I did know my wife loved her job and felt restless at home. She'd usually clean or keep herself busy when she had to be home, but this time she stayed in bed. She could barely move. I knew something was wrong, but she wouldn't talk to me. I got the mail and found something alarming. It was a letter to my wife, explaining the reason for her immediate termination. I was shocked. I ran on to find that not only was she fired, she was being sued in court. I was so confused. What was happening? I walked like a zombie into her bedroom, finding my wife lying awake in bed, staring at the ceiling. I threw the papers at her and asked for an explanation. Once she gathered them up, she started hyperventilating. Once she calmed down, she probably figured I was going to find out anyway, so she told me what happened. 8 months ago, she'd gotten a patient to work with who was in a dirt bike accident. He was learning how to walk again, basically, and couldn't use his hands for anything either. She had fed him, spoke with him, and really gotten to know him. She helped him to go to the bathroom and shower, and when he asked her to help him with something else that wasn't allowed, she did. I was instantly heartbroken. She was mine and I was hers. By helping this guy, she sacrificed her career and marriage. What's worse is he was married too. His wife was the one suing my wife and her employer, maybe because he felt bad about it and told her. I couldn't believe it. She begged me to stay with her because she needed me now more than ever. She didn't love AP, she knew that. She just felt bad for him as his caretaker. I reminded her that the vows we took meant she would be my wife and only help me with things like that. The same was expected of me for her. She took advantage of the trust she had as a physical therapist and had sex with her vulnerable patient. For all I knew, she instigated it. She just admitted she spoke with him and got to know him well. Was that her way of telling me she fell in love? His wife didn't deserve this betrayal either, probably while she stood by his side during the long recovery. My wife had a very hard time ahead of her, but I wasn't going to make it any easier. I moved out, waiting for all this to settle before I filed for divorce. After she was found guilty and in a whole hue of trouble, it was easy for me to win more favor. She owes a ton of money and can no longer practice physical therapy. I don't know how or if she's moved forward in life. She called everyone she ever met or came in contact with to ask for help and was met with a ton of rejections and criticism. She pretty much fell off the face of the earth after that. I don't know if she managed to pay off all that money or if she was arrested. I never wanted to look into it and find out. By the time I could move back into our house, it was like a tomb of old memories, frozen in a time when nothing was wrong. It was scary. I had help from friends and family to get rid of all that stuff and put the house up for sale. With the profits from that, I bought a nicer house on land with horses. I grew up with horses, so it really feels like home. I also decided I wanted my home, horses, and self to become a haven for a child in need. Since my wife abandoned me before we were able to adopt, I did it myself. I adopted a 10-year-old girl, who's now 15. I've kept very busy living life on a farm, and with my daughter's help, I give horseback riding lessons. It's like I've lived more than one life and became a better person after my failed marriage. I'm proud I made it through, and I'm happy my ex suffered through the reality of her choice. Although she says this man initiated the contact, there's no way to know that, and no matter who initiated it, it never should have happened. 2 marriages, and your wife's promising hopes for the future were ruined. She obviously wasn't expecting to be caught and thought it was okay to risk it all for one encounter. It's a shame she couldn't see it would be the worst decision of her life. Marriages are meant to make people stronger and encourage personal growth. This can help people to become a source of light to those around them. It's a beautiful thing when it happens as it should. You grew wiser because of this unexpected life change. You became a beacon of hope for yourself and your daughter without the help of anyone else. You are an inspiration, and I wish you continued peace and prosperity. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened.